Who allowed him to wail like that? Preston Vale's voice echoed sharply through the marble hallways, piercing the silence like a striking thunderclap. The cries shattered the calm of the mansion, and so did he. Maya Williams stopped abruptly while wiping the second-floor window, her damp microfiber cloth held midair. She had only been at the Vale estate for 5 days, tasked with routine cleaning in the East Wing. No one ever mentioned the 5th floor. In fact, most of the staff steered clear of it as if it were haunted. But the agonizing, repetitive sobbing rising again was impossible for her to ignore. It was not a cry of hunger or tiredness. It was raw terror, the kind that gnawed from within. The butler called up from downstairs, "Miss, avoid the upper wing." She did not reply. Maya ascended the last steps, her heart pounding fiercely. At the end of the corridor, behind a half-open door, a flickering light from a sensory projector pulsed steadily. A boy, perhaps 7 years old, was curled up on the carpet, rocking violently while rhythmically banging his forehead against a bookshelf. No one was nearby to comfort or watch over him. Only pain and repetition filled the space. She hesitated at the doorframe, every instinct telling her to turn away, but something deeper within, a buried memory, held her still. Her brother Jeremy had done the same thing. Identical rocking, identical sounds. She recalled it clearly. Under the dinner table, arms wrapped tightly around his chest, tears streaming down a face nobody understood. Quietly, Maya stepped forward into the room. In the room, she crouched a few feet away and whispered softly, "Hey, sweetheart," her voice barely rising above his sobs. "I'm not going to touch you. I am just sitting right here." The boy did not answer, but his movements slowed a little. She kept her hands visible with palms facing up. Then carefully, she raised one hand and drew a basic sign across her chest, the word safe. It was a gesture she had not used in many years, one her grandmother had taught her to soothe Jeremy when words failed. The boy looked at her briefly, just a moment, then returned to rocking himself. Suddenly, a sharp voice shattered the silence from behind her. "What are you doing?" Maya spun around quickly. Standing in the doorway was Preston Vale, an imposing figure dressed with exact precision and barely restrained anger. One hand gripped his phone, the other held the doorknob, as if it might break under his strength. "I apologize, sir," Maya replied, standing on instinct. "I heard him crying." "Who allowed you to be in this room?" Preston demanded. "No one. I just thought he might be in danger. Step away from my son." Her body tensed, but she complied carefully, stepping aside as Preston stepped toward the boy. The moment he tried to lift his son, the child burst out screaming louder, kicking, clawing, arms flailing in panic. Preston struggled to hold him, taken aback by the intensity. "What is wrong with him?" he muttered. "Why does he—" "May I?" Maya asked softly, stepping forward again. Preston did not stop her. She knelt down, reached out, and as soon as the child sensed her presence, his screaming began to subside. He leaned toward her and sank into her arms as if he had been waiting for her all along. His small hands clutched her sleeve tightly. He pressed his face against her shoulder. The silence that followed was complete. If this moment moved you, please give Maya a like. She didn't rescue him with words, but through calm compassion. Share with us in the comments where you are watching from, because you might not be the only one nearby feeling this gentle warmth right now. Preston stared, stunned. "How?" "What did you do?" he asked. "I didn't do anything, sir," Maya replied softly. "I just listened and signed. You know, sign language, a little. My brother is nonverbal autistic, and this used to soothe him." Preston's posture altered almost imperceptibly. His suit suddenly seemed too tight. His presence that had been so commanding a moment before now seemed uncertain, as if he didn't know how to act. "What is your name?" he inquired. "Maya Williams. I clean the East Wing." You're not a therapist? No, sir, just a cleaner. He watched her hold his son as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Can you stay a little longer today? Maya nodded while gently rocking the boy in her arms. Yes, sir, she whispered. Preston turned and walked slowly out of the room. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. No echoes of pain, no hurried footsteps, no doors slamming. Just a boy and a stranger, now no longer strange, wrapped in peaceful understanding. And though Preston did not say it aloud, the unspoken gratitude filled the air. The expression on his face revealed it all. Something had changed. Something new was unfolding. The sun had already set lower by the time Maya descended the stairs again, her back aching slightly from holding the boy for such a long time. Eliza had overheard Preston call him that once. Sam finally fell asleep in her arms, his cheeks resting softly against the curve of her shoulder as if he truly belonged there. She carefully placed him on a beanbag in the corner of the nursery and covered him with a weighted blanket she had found folded in the closet. He did not move. Now the grand house felt heavier than when she first stepped inside. Each chandelier gleamed, yet seemed unwelcoming. Each marble tile beneath her feet echoed like a reminder that she was out of place. She was simply a cleaner, a temporary worker at that, and she had just crossed a serious line. Turning toward the service hallway, she expected to be sent away, perhaps even fired immediately. Miss Williams. The voice came behind her, crisp and firm. She spun around and saw Preston Vale standing at the corridor's end with crossed arms, his face unreadable. He no longer held his phone. Instead, a small legal pad rested in his hand, the kind used when something important was about to happen. Instinctively, Maya straightened. Yes, sir? In my office, please. Her heart sank slightly. She nodded and followed him down the long corridor through double doors into an office she had only ever cleaned from outside. It was immaculate, modern, and sparsely furnished. Dark wooden shelves were lined with books that showed no signs of wear. A wall made of windows offered a clear view of the private garden outside. At the farthest point of the room stood an enormous oak desk, polished to a shine. He motioned toward the chair facing the desk. Sit down, he said. Maya complied, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Preston positioned himself opposite her and stayed quiet for several moments. The sound of a pen tapping against the edge of a notepad broke the silence. Somewhere in the distance, the ticking of a grandfather clock could be heard. The atmosphere resembled that of a courtroom, leaving Maya uncertain whether she was the witness or the defendant. You dealt with him like someone who had done it countless times, he finally spoke. I have not. Not with him, but with someone like him. He nodded toward her brother, Jeremy. He passed away 4 years ago. He was 10. Preston's eyes lifted briefly, and for a fleeting moment, a trace of emotion crossed his face. I am sorry. Maya replied quietly, Thank you. Silence returned before he leaned back in his chair. No therapist, no specialist, no trained expert has been able to calm Eliza the way you did. Not in 2 years. They all failed. And then you showed up with a rag in your hand and managed to calm him. Maya's throat tightened. I did not fix him, sir. I simply saw him. The comment seemed to stop him mid-thought. The pen he had been tapping came to a halt. You saw him. Children like Eliza do not need fixing. They need to be listened to. Their silence cannot be hurried. You must be ready to sit with them in that quiet. Preston blinked deliberately. You sound like someone who ought to be doing more than just mopping floors. I am simply someone who needed employment, sir. My grandmother has medical expenses, and this pays better than working at the diner. He glanced at his notes and then closed the notepad completely. I want to propose something to you. Maya blinked. Sir, I require someone who can truly connect with Eli, someone dependable, not another overqualified stranger with a clipboard and a temporary contract. Someone he already trusts. I am not a nanny. I do not need a nanny. I need you. She shook her head softly. Sir, with all due respect, I will double your pay, he said, without allowing her to speak further. You will stay in the staff area, a private room, all expenses covered. Weekends off, health insurance if you do not have it already, and you will never have to mop floors again. Maya felt her heart pounding. The numbers spun in her mind. That amount could mean proper care for Grandma Loretta. No more missed medications, no more stretching food stamps. But she understood the stakes. This was not just a job. This was a boy wrapped in delicate routines and even more fragile trust. Accepting and failing him would not be just another nanny leaving. It would be betrayal. I am not sure if I can. Preston leaned in with his elbows on the desk. Listen, I have had behaviorists with degrees from Stanford, nannies from top agencies, and even a family counselor who charged $2,000 per hour. None of them lasted more than a week. You came in, said nothing, and The boy rested his head on your shoulder. I am not sure what that signifies, but I know it is uncommon. Maya swallowed nervously. It is not magic, sir. It is simply care. That is even more uncommon. She glanced at her hands with chipped nail polish and all. She thought about Loretta and the gentle way she would say, Baby, if God opens a door, do not waste time arguing about the knob. When will I begin the next morning? I will have the room ready tonight. Maya nodded in agreement. Okay, I will try. Preston stood up and offered his hand. She shook it, small and firm. As she exited the office, her thoughts were racing. She had not packed for a live-in position. She had not even informed her landlord that she was moving out. Yet beneath all the chaos, there was a softer feeling she had not experienced in a long time. Purpose. The following morning, Maya arrived carrying a small duffel bag over one shoulder and a cardboard box under the other arm. The housekeeper, Mrs. Green, escorted her to the staff quarters, located on the east side of the mansion near the backyard garden. The room was modest, but cozy, with a twin bed, a reading chair, and a desk positioned by the window. Mr. Vale had this redone last night, Mrs. Green explained as she handed Maya a key card. He said you are important. I am just a helper, Maya replied. Perhaps, Mrs. Green said wisely, but he does not give spare rooms to helpers. Maya smiled politely and unpacked quickly. She kept her clothes neatly on hangers and placed a small frame photo of Loretta on the nightstand. By 9:30 in the morning, she found herself standing outside Eli's nursery again. This time, as she stepped inside, the boy was waiting. He was already awake, seated on the rug, organizing colored blocks into 2 groups of blue. Morning, Eli, she whispered gently. He did not glance up, but paused for a brief moment. She moved closer and sat cross-legged a few feet away, silent and non-threatening. After some time, he pushed a red block toward her with his toe. She smiled softly and said, "Thanks." She nudged a blue block back to him. The interaction had started. Hours passed in this manner, no conversation, only the rhythm of colors and repetition. At one moment, she started humming gentle, low gospel melodies. Eli did not resist. In fact, he leaned in subtly, much like someone drawn toward a comforting fire. From the doorway, Preston watched quietly. He was not prepared to voice it yet, but something about the way Maya remained calm and patient without trying to fix or force anything made his chest tighten in a way he could not quite understand. This was not fear or grief, but something different. Hope. Maya stood near the nursery window as dust settled softly around her. Her arms were loosely crossed, and her eyes rested on the garden below. The day had unfolded more peacefully than she had anticipated. No screaming, no wild outbursts, no desperate running. Eli remained silent, as always. He mostly stayed absorbed in the wooden puzzles and color sorting games she had arranged, but this time he allowed her to sit closer. He did not pull away when she sang a quiet melody beneath her breath. He even reached out briefly to touch her sleeve when she stretched for a blue triangle. That single gentle contact sparked something cautious, almost sacred inside her. A flicker of hope stirred within her as soft footsteps echoed behind. She turned just in time to see Preston Vale entering the nursery. He was not dressed in his usual suit, but wore a white shirt with rolled-up cuffs and gray trousers. His face appeared less rigid than usual, a bit gentler around the eyes. "How was he today?" he inquired, his voice softer than the sharp bark she recalled from their first encounter. "Peaceful," she answered, a slight smile lifting one corner of her mouth. "No outbursts, no biting or hitting." He was calm. Preston moved further into the room, his gaze fixed on his son, who lay on his stomach, carefully pushing a toy train along the tracks. "I don't know what you are doing," he murmured, "but it seems to be working." "It's not a trick, Mr. Vale," she responded softly. "It's about being present and letting him take the lead." He nodded slowly, as if attempting to grasp a language he had never learned to understand. "He used to adore trains," he said suddenly. "Emmy, my late wife, used to take him to the Railroad Museum every other Saturday." Maya's eyes shifted toward Preston. Now his face was turned toward the window, his eyes distant. "He hasn't asked to go since she passed," he continued quietly. "Not once." She said nothing and did not interrupt, allowing the silence to fill the space between them. "I thought we were managing," he continued after a moment. "After the funeral, I hired the finest therapists money could buy and signed him up for every specialized program that would accept him. I spared no expense. Yet things only worsened. The tantrums, the fear of strangers, the overwhelming anxieties." He turned around yelling and faced Maya. "And now here you are, and he is calmer than I have seen him in more than a year." Maya shifted slightly. "Grief is not something you can treat like a common cold, Mr. Vale. It is not a straight path, not for you, not for him." Preston did not reply immediately. Then he asked, "Do you believe he still remembers her?" "I believe he senses her absence," she answered after a moment of silence, "even if he cannot express it in words." He sat down in the armchair by the bookshelf, elbows resting on his knees, watching his son with a look that mixed guilt with awe. Suddenly he spoke. "I was married for 10 years. We met in college. I was rigid. She was jazz. She laughed loudly, danced barefoot on our balcony in the rain, and made breakfast at midnight." Maya smiled softly. "She sounds amazing." "She was," he said, and a slight crack showed in his voice. Eli looked up briefly and met his father's eyes. Preston stood up and slowly moved closer to his son. "Hey, buddy," he said gently, crouching down next to him. "How is the train coming?" Eli did not respond or react, but he did not pull away either. Preston glanced at Maya and asked, "Do you think he will ever speak again?" "I think he already is," she answered warmly. "You just need to learn how to listen to the language he trusts." He held his son's gaze a little longer, then nodded and stood. Later that night, Maya went to her room in the staff section. It was simple, yet cozy. She had unpacked the few belongings she had: a change of clothes, a couple of books, a worn journal, and a framed picture of her grandmother Loretta holding a young Jeremy. She took it in her hands and gently moved her thumb over the glass. "You would like him?" she said softly. "He may be chaotic, but he is making the effort." There came a tap on the door. She opened it to see Mrs. Green carrying a tray with a covered dish and a folded cloth. "Mr. Vale mentioned you have not eaten since lunchtime," the older lady remarked, with a hint of curiosity in her tone. "He insisted that you have a proper meal." Maya blinked. "I did not notice how time slipped away." It seemed the boy had lost track too, as he did not cry even once today. A true wonder. Maya accepted the tray with a thankful grin. "Thank you." Before she left, Mrs. Green paused. "Do not get too comfortable," she advised, though there was no harshness in her voice. Mr. Vale's moods shift like the breeze. Maya gave a single nod. "I expect nothing." She shut the door behind her and settled at her desk, lifting the plate's cover to reveal grilled salmon, roasted sweet potatoes, and green beans. Her stomach growled in reply. As she ate, her thoughts kept returning to the vision of Preston lying on the floor beside his son. The moment had been brief, yet sincere and fragile, making her wonder, what kind of man attempts to command the world, yet forgets how to hold his own child? The next morning, Maya entered the nursery at precisely 8:30. Eliza was already awake, sitting near the window and tracing shapes on the glass. The sunlight traced a warm streak across the carpet as he gently touched the glass with his finger. "Morning, Eli," she spoke softly, moving closer with a slow, deliberate pace. He did not turn around, but did not tense up either. She settled next to him and said quietly, "Not too close." After a few moments of stillness, she took out a small whiteboard and a dry erase marker. "I thought we could give something a try," she offered kindly. She sketched a sun followed by a cloud, then passed the marker to him. He gazed at it for a long time, then hesitantly drew a crooked heart. Maya smiled, tears pricking behind her eyes. From the hallway, Preston stood frozen outside the door. He observed the scene through the narrow gap, his hand hovering close to the handle but not pushing it open. Something inside him was slowly shifting, painfully like an ancient hinge learning to swing once more. Without making a sound, he turned away before they could notice. Yet his thoughts remained locked inside the room. Later that evening, he sat alone in his study with an untouched glass of scotch before him. On the desk lay a file marked Maya Williams, containing her job application, a background check, and a handwritten reference letter from her former manager at a diner in Queens. He read the note twice. It stated, "She is not fancy, but she arrives early, stays late, and never complains. She is kind and listens, even when others struggle to express themselves." Preston folded the paper carefully and leaned back in his chair. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees lining the stone fence. Inside, for the first time in months, silence felt like a soothing presence rather than an emptiness. A void existed in a home constructed by wealth, protected by strict rules and shadowed by grief. Finally, someone arrived who did not attempt to mend the fractures. Instead, she simply stayed beside them. For Eliza, and perhaps for Preston Vale as well, that presence was sufficient to start anew. Nearly 3 weeks had passed since Maya Williams accepted the role that was not originally intended for her, to care for the boy whom no one could reach. By this point, her presence in the Vale mansion had shifted from a strange occurrence to an essential part of their lives. Each morning, she entered Eliza's nursery, performing the same quiet routine. There were no abrupt motions or grand displays, only the steady practice of showing up. In response, Eliza began to offer more in return. Though he had not uttered a single word, his eyes started to find hers. He followed her silently with trust, handing over objects like a block, a button, or puzzle pieces, as if attempting to communicate messages he did not yet know how to express in words. That morning, Maya introduced a new activity. She brought in a soft mat, fragrant clay, and a set of cards displaying emotions with bold, cartoon-style faces. "This one means happy," she explained, holding up the first card. "Happy, like when music plays." Eliza touched the card lightly, then glanced up at her face. Gradually, he pressed the card against his chest. "Yes," she murmured, "that is correct." When Preston Vale returned home that evening, the atmosphere of the house had transformed once again. It was no longer the silence that had lingered for a year, nor was it empty, but rather softly buzzing with quiet signs of life. In the kitchen, Mrs. Green. Soft jazz played gently from the tablet as the windows were left slightly ajar. Somewhere upstairs, a child laughed softly, not loudly or boisterously, but with a quick, pure giggle that caught him off guard. He let his keys fall onto the hallway console and moved toward the sound. Maya Williams was kneeling on the living room carpet, a toy giraffe in one hand and a sock puppet in the other. Sam sat opposite her, cross-legged, watching closely as the giraffe and the sock puppet acted out a playful quarrel over a cup of make-believe tea. When the sock puppet toppled with a squeaky oof, a wide smile spread across Sam's face. No noise came from him, yet his entire expression brightened. Preston Vale could not recall the last time he had seen that. Maya noticed him standing in the doorway and quickly straightened up, brushing lint off her slacks. "Mr. Vale, I didn't realize you were here." He entered slowly, still focused on Sam. "Was that him laughing?" She nodded. "Sort of. He didn't make a sound, but he was very close." Preston crouched down beside his son. "Hey, buddy," he greeted. Sam did not shy away or flinch. Instead, he reached out to briefly touch his father's shirt before returning his gaze to the toys. Preston felt a lump form in his throat. "He's starting to trust you more," Maya observed quietly. Preston nodded without diverting his eyes from Sam. He used to play like that with Emma. She had this ridiculous sock puppet voice, yet he adored it. Standing up, he looked down at Maya. "Thank you." She returned a gentle smile, her eyes warm. "I am not doing anything you couldn't manage yourself. That is clear." "The part I struggle most to accept," he admitted, half joking and half resigned. Later that evening, Maya made her way to the small garden behind the staff wing. It was late spring, and the aylas had just begun to bloom. She carried a mug filled with her grandmother's special tea blend, consisting of cinnamon and dried hibiscus. Sitting on the wooden bench beneath the magnolia tree, she took a deep breath. At first, she had feared her stay here would be short-lived, that a single wrong word or moment could send her back to mopping floors. Yet, Preston had not merely tolerated her presence. He began to seek her out, initially asking only about Eliza, then about meals, then books, and more recently, just to talk. She did not deceive herself into believing she belonged in his world. He was white, wealthy, influential, and cautious. She was none of those things. But when they spoke, truly spoke, there was an honesty between them, something genuine and human. The garden gate creaked softly behind her, and she turned to see Preston standing in the moonlight holding 2 mugs. "I thought you might enjoy chamomile," he said. She blinked, surprised. "That is very thoughtful," she replied. "Well, I figured it was either that or more bourbon. And you do not seem like the type to drink bourbon before bed," he joked. She laughed, saying, "That would have me flat on my back in no time." Preston sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Do you come out here every night when you cannot sleep?" he asked, and she answered, "Same here." They sipped quietly for a moment before he spoke again, his voice softer and more cautious now. "I've been meaning to ask about your brother. What happened?" She exhaled slowly and said, "He had a seizure. Complications from an illness. He passed away in the hospital while I was busy completing insurance documents." Preston looked at her and said, "I am sorry. Thank you." He was the only person in the world who saw me without expecting anything in return. He remained silent for a moment, then added, "That sounds like Eli." "Yes," she whispered softly. "It really does." After another pause, Preston ran his fingers through his hair. "You make this seem effortless, but I know it is not. I know I am difficult, that this house can feel cold, and that Eli's challenges can be very overwhelming." She turned toward him. "You are not difficult, Mr. Vale. You are just mourning in the only way you know how his eyes met hers. Please call me Preston." She hesitated briefly, then nodded. "All right, Preston." A breeze stirred the branches outside. The lights from the second floor cast a gentle glow through the windows. Above them somewhere. Eli shifted in his bed. "I want to learn," Preston declared. Suddenly, "I want to understand what you know about him, about how to connect with him." Maya's heart started beating faster. "You are already halfway there. I watch you with him. The way you notice his signals, the way you sense his needs before he even shows them. I do not have that instinct." "You do not need instinct," she replied. "You need willingness. And he will teach you if you are patient enough to listen." He looked at her, and in that moment something changed between them. "I want to give it a try," he said. And for the very first time, Maya saw not the CEO, not the man with flawless posture and carefully chosen words, but a father who is uncertain, imperfect, and finally ready. Everything changed the next day. Maya conducted a brief lesson in the living room, focusing on simple sign language phrases such as more, stop, and help. Loving Preston joined them, awkward but sincere, while Eliza observed carefully and then imitated the signs. At one moment, Preston signed more, and Eliza replied with a roughly formed attempt at the same gesture. Preston's eyes brimmed with emotion, yet he remained silent, simply nodding, smiling, and gently reaching for his son's hand. Later that night, Maya sat by the window, writing in her journal, recalling the experience. "He's reconnecting with his son," she wrote. "Not as a rescuer or someone fixing things, but as a father picking up a new way to communicate. One built on quiet understanding, trust, and steady hands." She looked up suddenly when there was a soft knock at her door. Preston was there holding a book. "I found this among Emma's belongings," he said. "It is about raising children with sensory challenges. I figured we could read it together." She accepted the book gently and said, "I would like that." He paused by the threshold, adding, "Thank you for staying." That evening, Maya sat on her bed with the book resting on her lap, the memory of Jeremy warm in her heart. She wasn't simply remaining. She was creating something meaningful, slowly and quietly, much like Eliza's laughter and the trust blooming between two unlikely hands. The early summer sunlight poured into the nursery through the windows, casting warm golden rays across the wooden floor. Maya sat cross-legged opposite Eliza, patiently encouraging her to press various animal shapes into a soft patch of kinetic sand. This had become part of their morning ritual, a sensory moment before breakfast that provided calm and consistency to start their day with gentle ease. Throughout the day, Eli remained silent, but increasingly responded through eye contact, small movements, and cautious smiles. When Maya sang quietly, he gently swayed, and when she laughed, he tilted his head to watch her longer. At one point, as she reached for a sand mold that caught his interest, he touched her wrist softly and nudged it toward her. "Thank you," she whispered. He said nothing, yet his fingers brushed her palm in return. Soon Preston started joining these sessions 3 times a week. He no longer stayed at a distance with folded arms and an unreadable expression. Instead, he knelt next to his son, imitating Maya's signs and learning the gestures carefully with focused attention. That morning, Maya signed the word for cow by forming horns with her fingers. Eli did not mimic her, but stared intently, then pointed at the small cow figure on the mat and pressed it into the sand with surprising precision. Preston chuckled softly, genuinely amused. "He's beginning to understand," he remarked. Maya smiled warmly before facing him. "So are you." Later that day, after lunch, Preston invited her for a walk through the garden. Eli had fallen asleep in the sunroom, wrapped loosely in a blanket with a stuffed bear held tightly in one hand. Maya hesitated, uncertain if this crossed professional boundaries, but then followed him past the manicured hedges toward the old gazebo. They strolled side by side, slowly. Preston had taken off his jacket and loosened his collar. It was the first time she had seen him without that. Eli's therapist called this morning. He mentioned, "I didn't bring it up earlier because I wanted to observe how today went." Maya looked up and asked, "Is everything okay?" The therapist responded that Eli's developmental milestones remain delayed, but he has noticed remarkable improvements in his behavior. "He is starting to trust again," Maya whispered. "Trusting requires more than therapy. It demands a sense of security." Preston nodded with his hands in his pockets. The therapist also inquired, "What changed in the home environment?" I told her it was you. Maya laughed softly and tucked a braid behind her ear. "I'm only one part of it." He stopped walking and faced her, saying, "You are the part that matters." Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment the world seemed to shrink. The breeze quieted, and the birds' songs faded away. Preston's expression shifted from the usual guarded, detached look to something more vulnerable and sincere. Before Emma passed, his voice had grown rougher than usual as he said, "I was always 2 steps behind. I never realized what was right in front of me until it was too late." Maya said nothing and just listened. She managed everything: the school forms, therapy sessions, the tantrums. "I was only responsible for writing the checks." He swallowed deeply. "When she became ill, I panicked. I tried to control everything, believing that order could save her, that routine could replace her presence. Grief makes us cling to anything that is still, because anything that moves might vanish." He looked at her sharply. Surprised, she slowly nodded in agreement. "You talk as if you've lost something precious, someone important to you," she whispered softly. "We all carry memories that linger like faint echoes." They walked on quietly, the shadows extending over the garden. Maya reached out, gently touching a blooming camellia. "These flowers used to grow outside my grandmother's porch," she said softly. She always called them stubborn, blooming only when they chose to, not when anyone expected them to. "Sounds familiar," Preston responded with a smile. "I guess it does." That evening, as the sun lowered and Eli napped on the couch, Maya found herself in the study. Preston had invited her to look through an old therapy binder he discovered in the closet. It held notes and video recordings from Eli's earliest sessions. Emma had filmed everything Eli said, then handed Maya a USB. She often said, "One day, we'll forget the difficult moments and miss the small details. Let's keep those details safe." Sitting at the desk, Maya opened the folder on the screen. The first video started playing. A much younger Eliza, perhaps 4 years old, sat at a small table with a therapist. Emma's voice quietly narrated from behind the camera, guiding Preston on how to use signs for eat, sleep, and mom. Maya watched silently as the video unfolded. In one scene, Eli reached toward Preston and awkwardly signed love. Emma's laughter followed warmly. "That's your daddy, baby. Good job." Maya shifted slightly in her seat. Preston stood silently in the doorway, not stepping inside, but simply watching. His face looked pale, a sight I had forgotten until that moment. "I haven't seen these videos since before the funeral," he said quietly. Maya replied, "She was good to him." "She was everything he needed," he added, his voice trembling slightly. "And then I erased her." Maya slowly rose and walked toward him. "No, you didn't. You were trying to survive. You were breaking apart in silence." Preston glanced down at her. "Is that what I was doing?" "Yes, but now you are healing," she said softly. He looked at her, his expression hard to read. "And you? Are you healing too?" she asked after a pause. "I think so. Some days more than others." For a long moment, they just stood there, surrounded only by the gentle buzz of the computer and the faint echo of Emma's laughter playing in the background. Then Preston gently reached out and touched Maya's hand. She did not pull away. That night, something shifted between them quietly, not in words or promises, but simply in shared presence. Maya lay awake in bed, her mind restless. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a new kind of awareness. Something was emerging between them, unspoken, yet undeniable. For the first time in many years, she no longer felt like a stranger in someone else's story, but as though she might truly belong. Upstairs, Eliza stirred in her sleep, mumbling a soft sound, high-pitched and almost like a word. Maya did not catch it, but the house did. It was listening now, and so was she. The following morning began with the warm scent of cinnamon flowing through the kitchen. Maya stood quietly, letting the moment settle around her. Barefoot on the tiled floor, she gently turned slices of French toast in the pan. Her apron bore a light dusting of flour, and a faint smile graced her lips as she quietly hummed an old Sam Cooke song under her breath. It was a simple, peaceful happiness, something she had not experienced in many years. Preston entered the room quietly, fresh from the shower, dressed in a white button-up shirt and gray trousers, without a tie for once. He paused at the doorway, watching her work. "I did not realize breakfast could sound so appealing," he said softly. Maya glanced over her shoulder. "You mean smell," she replied. He leaned casually against the doorframe. "No, I meant what I said." There was a meaningful pause, brief but charged. She placed 2 golden slices on a plate and turned off the stove. "Eliza is still asleep," she mentioned. "I thought I would surprise him. He likes the edges a little crisp." Preston stepped fully into the kitchen and began placing forks and napkins on the table. "You always remember the little things," he said. Maya looked down, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "It is in the details that the heart truly resides." He paused, reflecting on her words, then continued setting the table. "I never realized how empty this place felt until you started filling it." Before Maya could answer, the baby monitor on the counter softly crackled to life. Eliza's sleepy whimper was followed by the gentle sound of small feet hitting the carpet. Maya moved naturally to remove her apron. "I will go," she said. Preston touched her wrist. "Let me." It was a quiet gesture, but she understood exactly what he meant. It was his time now. She observed as he left the kitchen and climbed the stairs. A man who once kept one hand on the world and one foot out the door was now fully engaged. When he returned, holding Eliza in his arms, the boy was clutching a small stuffed bear and blinking against the morning brightness. Preston carefully placed him in his booster seat and took a seat beside him. "Good morning, buddy," Maya Williams said while setting the plate before him. "Your favorite?" Eliza did not reply, but picked up a piece of toast with his fingers and began to chew slowly. Maya noticed how Preston helped him spread syrup on the toast, his actions gentle and patient. There was no hurry in the room or any pressure, just a genuine connection. Later that day, the house received a visitor. Dr. Lydia Chen, Eliza's longtime developmental psychologist, a petite woman with sharp eyes behind silver-framed glasses, entered. She had known Eliza since he was 2, Maya explained. Dr. Chen stepped into the foyer with a serene smile. "Still smells like expensive silence in here," she said, half joking. Preston laughed softly. "That is changing," he replied. Maya offered the visitor a glass of water and led her to the sunroom where Eliza was building wooden blocks by the window. Preston stood at the doorway, gripping his hand slightly. Dr. Chen observed the boy quietly, then leaned closer to Maya, whispering, "He is focused and peaceful." Preston came forward, asking, "Do you see progress?" The doctor nodded slowly. "Not only in his behavior, but in attachment as well. He is bonding." Preston glanced at Maya while Dr. Chen continued her careful watch. His eyes met hers, and he asked, "Tell me, Maya Williams, what are you doing differently? Maya hesitated and replied, "I treat him as if he is already whole, not broken." Dr. Chen observed her carefully and commented, "That is uncommon. It really should not be so." After the session, Dr. Chen pulled Preston Vale aside. She said, "You have done more than just hiring help. You have welcomed something sacred into this home. Remember that." Preston stayed silent for a moment. His gaze shifted to Maya in the distance, kneeling next to Eliza, showing him how to sign happy with her hands. His son imitated her quietly, but it was unmistakably there. That afternoon, Maya wandered out to the garden by herself, needing space to reflect. The camellias were now in full bloom, bursting with pink and white petals. She settled on a stone bench and let out a slow breath. She was becoming attached in a way that felt risky. This was supposed to be temporary, a job, a short chapter amid other duties. Yet in the peaceful moments, in Eliza's gentle touch, and the way Preston's eyes were changing, it started to feel like something more. She reached into her bag and took out an old photograph of her mother and younger sister on a porch swing. Her mother was laughing with her head thrown back, and her sister's hands were caught mid-sign. Maya traced their faces with her thumb and whispered, "I still carry you." Behind her, footsteps approached. "I hope I am not interrupting," Preston said softly. Maya quickly slipped the photo away. "Just thinking," she answered. He sat beside her, careful, not too close. He started and then stopped. "I have been meaning to ask, why did you take this?" "Why did you hire me?" she asked him, her gaze steady and composed. "Because I needed to recall who I truly was. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I could help someone else find the same clarity." Preston nodded thoughtfully. "You have helped more than you realize." There was a brief pause. Then Maya asked, "And you? Why did you really bring me on?" He hesitated, revealing a hint of desperation. "I was worn out, completely out of ideas. But then I noticed how Eliza looked at you, not scared, not shrinking back, but simply present." Silence hung between them for a moment. Preston added, "I owe you an apology. When you first arrived, I was quick to judge, making assumptions. I thought you were merely a maid," she said, calmly, without bitterness. He looked remorseful. "Yes," Preston admitted. Maya met his eyes. "Many people do that all the time, but you are not that," he said. "No," she whispered. "I am someone who notices what others usually miss." He nodded slowly. "You saw him, and now I see you." A subtle shift passed between them, fragile and charged with unspoken tension. That evening, as the sun sank low and cast long shadows through the corridors, Maya walked past the study with its door wide open. Inside, Preston was seated at the old upright piano that Maya had dusted off several weeks before. He struck a few hesitant notes and then began to play a melody that was tentative and uncertain, but beautiful nonetheless. She stood quietly, absorbing the music. When he stopped, she stepped inside. "I did not know you played," she said. "I used to," he replied softly. "Emma made me promise I would teach Eliza someday." "You must keep that promise," Maya urged. "Music has a way of speaking even when words fail." He looked up at her. "Will you sit with me?" Without hesitation, she took a seat beside him. He began again, this time slower. Maya hummed along and then, instinctively, started to sing the words. The lyrics to an ancient lullaby called Eli's Lullaby filled the room. Her hands moved smoothly, and her face shone with gentle warmth. Preston paused from playing and simply observed. "You are remarkable," he said softly. Maya fixed her gaze on him, her hands frozen midair. "I am just aware," she responded. "Many people are not." Preston reached out, lightly touching her wrist with a fingertip. It was an unspoken question. She did not pull away. That was her answer. Upstairs, Eli stirred in his bed and for the very first time called out, not with a cry, but with a word. Dada. This word rang down the stairs like a clear bell. Preston stood still. Maya gasped. The house, long silent and filled with sorrow, suddenly felt vibrant again. The word lingered like a delicate miracle. It was neither loud nor perfectly distinct, but undeniably real and alive. Preston sprang to his feet, almost toppling the piano bench. Maya was already moving, driven by instincts sharper than reason. Together, they rushed upstairs. Suddenly, the world became sharply clear through that single word. Eli sat upright in bed, his small hands clutching the edge of the blanket. His eyes were wide, not frightened but uncertain, as though he doubted the sound that had come from his mouth. Yet, when he saw Preston at the doorway, a flicker of recognition appeared on his face, a fragile hope. Preston knelt beside the bed. "Say it again," he whispered, voice shaking. "Please, just once more." Eli blinked, lips parting. He glanced at Maya behind Preston, then looked back again. At his father, no words were spoken, only a small hand reaching out to rest gently on Preston Vale's chest. That simple gesture was enough for Preston to wrap his arms around his son, holding him as if he might shatter without that embrace. "You did it," he whispered repeatedly with his forehead pressed softly against Eliza's hair. "You did it, buddy." Maya Williams stood quietly in the doorway with her hands clasped to her chest. She did not interrupt or say a word, because this moment belonged solely to them. Her eyes were moist, shining with a tender glow, reflecting the silent fulfillment of someone who had given a part of herself and was now witnessing something deeply precious unfold. The following morning, the atmosphere in the house felt completely changed. There was a brightness in the windows that had gone unnoticed before. A warmth lingered in the stillness that once felt empty. Even the staff moved differently, more slowly, more quietly, with a reverence as though they sensed a significant change. None could quite explain it. Preston canceled every meeting he had scheduled for the day. His assistant accepted it without question. "Family day," he said firmly. It was not up for discussion. He spent the morning with Eliza in the sunroom, reading picture books, building towers from colorful plastic bricks, and most wonderfully, coaxing a giggle with a ridiculous face. It was a small thing, but the sound was one Preston had waited for many years to hear. A sound that had brought him to the brink of tears more than once. Maya stayed nearby, not hovering but quietly present. She brought snacks, wiped sticky fingers, offered gentle words of encouragement, and whenever Eliza glanced at her, he returned fleeting, shy smiles. Despite the smiles, there was an underlying emotion. Around midday, Dr. Lydia Chen arrived without prior notice, yet felt welcome. Preston had messaged her the evening before. With just 3 words in all capital letters, he wrote, "Dada." She entered the foyer cautiously, like an investigator stumbling upon a rare moment of quiet happiness. After observing Eli play for several minutes, she remarked, "You were not exaggerating." His eyes appeared clearer and more focused. "He is becoming more grounded," Preston confirmed. Maya was present during the breakthrough. Dr. Chen responded, "That does not shock me." They moved into the dining room together, allowing Eli and Mia to continue playing without disturbance. "You realize this transforms everything," Lydia remarked. "I understand you will have to rethink long-term care, modify your daily habits, and perhaps bring back therapies. His improvements might accelerate now, and I want you to take charge," Preston said. "Only if Maya stays involved," he added. Lydia raised an eyebrow. "She is not a therapist," she pointed out. "She is something far greater," Preston responded, "someone he really trusts." Lydia pondered this and then gradually nodded in agreement. After lunch, Maya excused herself for a brief respite. She wandered to the garden, her refuge, and settled near the camellias plant. The gentle spring wind played with her braids, and she lifted her face, welcoming the sun's warmth. She should feel joy that Eli had finally spoken. Preston was evolving, but a subtle unease lingered in her chest, a feeling she struggled to understand. It felt like she was putting down roots where she had vowed never to. Suddenly, "Maya," she heard, spinning around. Preston stood just a few steps away, his hands tucked in his pockets and a tentative smile on his face. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said. He said you did not, then sat down beside her on the bench. "I was thinking we could celebrate. Just something simple like dinner tonight, just us and Eli." Maya's eyes softened. "That sounds wonderful," he agreed. "And tomorrow, I want to show you something personal." She tilted her head in curiosity. "It is nearby, something I have not shared in a long time about Emma." The mention of his late wife made the atmosphere heavy. Maya gently placed her hand on his arm. "You do not have to," she said quietly. "I want to," he replied. "You have given so much to our home, and I want you to see where it all began." That evening, the meal was modest, yet meaningful. Grilled salmon, asparagus, mashed sweet potatoes. Maya prepared the food, Preston arranged the table, and Eli carefully selected napkins for everyone. He handed Maya a blue one, himself a red, and his father a yellow. It was the first time Maya noticed him making a deliberate choice that included her. After dinner, they gathered by the fireplace. Preston poured each of them a glass of wine. Maya took only half as she preferred. "I used to sit right here with Emma," he said softly, his voice low, "this exact spot. When we first bought the house, we could not afford most of the furnishings, but we had this fireplace and a second-hand record player." A faint smile appeared as his eyes drifted away in memory. She used to sing to Eli every night, even when he would not respond. Even when the silence seemed endless, she never stopped trying. Maya's throat tightened. "You remind me of her," he said suddenly, "not because you are alike, but because you love with the same powerful, unyielding passion." She gazed at him with surprise and said, "Pri, I am not saying this lightly." A quiet pause followed. The fire crackled softly. He admitted, "I am unsure where this is headed, but I know what I feel when you are nearby, and I know how Eliza changes around you." Her eyes dropped as her heart pounded. He asked, "Do you sense it too?" Maya met his eyes and replied, "Yes, but I am afraid." "So am I," he whispered. They sat together in silence, a quiet that needed no filling. Later that evening, Maya lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her room was small and simple, tucked away in the back of the house, but it was hers for the time being. A soft knock came at the door. She rose, heart beating fast, and opened it. There stood Preston, not dressed in a suit nor armor, just himself. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "Neither could I," she replied softly. He did not enter or reach out. Instead, he looked at her like she really mattered. "I just wanted to thank you for helping me find him, for helping me find myself." Her lips curved into a gentle smile. "Good night, Preston." "Good night, Maya." Then he stepped away. She closed the door, leaned against it, and breathed out slowly. It was not love yet, but it was something genuine. And that was the true beginning. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains in Maya's room, casting delicate golden patterns on the wooden floor. She stayed in bed longer than usual, eyes open, her heart filled with a strange sense of calm. The memory of Preston's voice from the night before hovered in the stillness. It had not been a confession exactly, but something even more profound. An invitation into a reality they were both just beginning to understand. By the time she reached the kitchen, the house was already waking up. Sam sat at the island counter, sipping from a plastic cup filled with orange juice, while Preston leaned over a frying pan, trying to make scrambled eggs. Maya paused in the doorway, observing the two of them, father and son, sitting side by side like a long-awaited snapshot from a family album. Preston caught sight of her first and greeted her warmly. "Good morning," dressed casually in a navy t-shirt and jeans instead of his usual neat button-up shirt. Sam noticed Maya, and his eyes lit up. Without saying a word, he extended his hand toward her. It was the very first time he had reached out on his own. Maya crossed the room and gently squeezed his hand, whispering softly, "Good morning, sweetheart." Preston watched nearby, a subtle smile tugging at the corner of his mouth in quiet admiration. "I was thinking we could take Sam to the park today," Preston said. "There is one not far from here called Piedmont Park. I have not taken him there in a while, but I feel like it is the right moment now." Maya blinked in surprise. "That is a big step," she admitted. "I know, but I want to give it a try." The trip was not arranged with meticulous planning, and that was part of its appeal. Maya packed a small bag with snacks and wipes. Preston brought along a blanket and a folding stroller. Sam wore a baseball cap, which he refused to remove. The car ride was calm and pleasant, with soft jazz playing quietly, while the city slowly passed by the windows. Piedmont Park was vibrant with the colors and energy of spring. Children laughing, couples strolling with their dogs, elderly men reading newspapers on benches created a lively atmosphere. They chose a spot beneath a tall oak tree and spread out a blanket. Preston sat next to Eliza, pointing toward the ducks swimming on the lake, while Maya unpacked some sliced apples and cheese crackers. Eliza remained quiet, but his eyes tracked everything. He watched a group of boys playing catch nearby, his gaze lingering longer than usual. "Would you like to join, Eliza?" Preston asked softly, nodding toward the game. Eliza glanced at Maya, his expression uncertain. She smiled and said, "Just watch for now, okay? Maybe next time." Content with the answer, Eliza curled up beside her, nibbling on a cracker. A few minutes later, a voice called out from across the field. "Mr. Caldwell, is that you?" Preston looked up to see a woman in her early 40s approaching, dressed in running gear and sunglasses. "Rebecca Thorne," she introduced, extending her hand. "We met at the Chamber of Commerce dinner last year." Preston stood politely but remained cautious. "Ah, yes, of course. Good to see you," he replied. Rebecca glanced briefly at Maya and then down at Eliza. "This must be your son, I heard." "I'm glad to see he's doing well." Maya sensed a subtle but clear shift in tone, that quick judgment, surprise flickering at Maya's presence beside them. Rebecca's eyes did not linger, and her smile tightened. "Your new nanny?" Preston straightened, replying firmly, "This is Maya Williams. She is part of our family." Rebecca blinked. "Oh well, that's nice," before turning back to Eliza once more. Then back at Preston Vale. "Listen, I do not want to intrude. I just wanted to say hello. We should get together sometime. I will send you a message." With that, she jogged away. Maya pretended to focus on Eliza's snack, but felt heat rise along her neck. Preston sat down beside her quietly for a moment. "I am sorry about that," he said softly. "You do not have to be." "No," he insisted. Turning toward her, "You deserve more than to be seen as someone who only works for me." Maya met his gaze. "I do not need approval from strangers, Preston. I know who I am." His expression softened. "I wish everyone had your certainty." They spent another hour in the park, letting Eliza explore the grass, listen to birdsong, and collect small stones like treasures. When it was time to leave, he did not cry. He held Maya's hand and walked beside her all the way to the car. That evening, as twilight deepened over the estate, Preston stood by the window in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. Maya knocked gently on the door. "Come in." She stepped inside, pausing at the entrance. "Eliza is asleep." "Thank you." He motioned for her to sit. "There is something I want to show you." He opened a drawer and took out a worn photo album. Maya moved closer, sitting beside him on the leather couch. The album had a faint scent of aged paper and lavender. This, he said. Opening to the first page was Emma's idea. She began it when we first learned we were expecting every month a new photo. Every significant moment was carefully recorded, and after Emma passed away, I stopped adding new memories to it. The photographs were stunning. Emma's radiant smile, a baby Eli swaddled warmly, tiny footprints stamped in ink. As they flipped through the album, the vibrant colors gradually shifted to shades of gray, not physically, but emotionally. "This is the final picture," Preston said, pointing to an image of Emma holding Eli beneath a maple tree, her face glowing despite the medical tape on her arm, placed 2 weeks before she died. Maya traced the edge of the plastic cover softly and said, "She adored him so deeply." "She truly did," he murmured. And I let her down. I shut myself off. I buried my pain in endless work, in meetings, acting like grief wasn't consuming me. "You were barely surviving," Preston turned to her. "You keep me alive." The quiet that followed was not uncomfortable. It felt almost sacred. After a pause, he said, "I've been thinking. I want to officially hire you, not just as a housekeeper or caretaker, but as Eli's developmental guide. We'll arrange training and a concrete plan. I'll make it formal." Maya blinked, surprised. "That's very kind of you." "It's not kindness, it's essential. In the past 2 years, you've done more for him than any therapist or expert." She nodded slowly and agreed on one condition. "What is it?" "That we continue this together as partners, not titles or distance between us." He met her eyes and said, "Deal." They sat with the album open between them, two souls connected by loss and a fragile hope building beyond it. Just before she walked out, Preston called her name. Maya turned as he approached, and then without any rush, he wrapped her in an embrace. It was not romantic, not yet. It was something older and deeper, a recognition that silently said, "I see you." In the calm and safety of that moment, Maya finally allowed herself to feel that she truly belonged. The following morning began with a sudden knock. It was not the soft kind that suggested everyday calm, but a sharp and echoing sound that stirred tension and memory. Maya was in the kitchen, making Eli's favorite oatmeal when she heard it. Preston appeared moments later, his brow furrowed even before he reached the door. Standing there was a man dressed in a tailored gray suit with a clipboard tucked under his arm. He was not alone. 2 others flanked him, one dressed in business casual, the other wearing a sharp blazer with an earpiece. The emblem on the clipboard read, "Child Welfare Services." The suited man asked politely but firmly. Preston nodded slowly. "Yes. What is this about?" "My name is Marcus Fielding. We have received a report regarding possible neglect involving your son, Elijah Caldwell. We are here to conduct an assessment." For a brief moment, the only noise was the wind rustling through the trees. By that time, Maya had stepped into the hallway, holding Eli close against her side. She could feel the rapid beat of his little heart through her blouse. Preston moved outside, pulling the door half closed behind him. "This is ridiculous. Who made this report?" "I am sorry, but we are not allowed to reveal the source during the initial review," Marcus replied. "May we come inside?" asked Preston. His tone was calm, but Maya sensed the tension beneath his words. "Not until I have spoken with my lawyer," she replied firmly. "You are entitled to contact legal representation," Marcus stated. "However, if you refuse entry during a welfare check, we will have to take further action. A court order could be obtained." Maya stepped forward, still holding Eliza, who now grasped her even more tightly. "He is safe," she said, with steady resolve. "I have been with him every day. There is no neglect." Marcus looked her over closely. "And you are Maya Williams?" "I have been working here for several months as his full-time caregiver," she explained. Another agent made notes in a notebook. Preston exhaled sharply through his nose and said, "Give me 5 minutes." He went back inside and made 2 phone calls, first to his lawyer, then to the head of a private security company. Returning, he opened the door wide. "You may come in, but you will be monitored, and nothing is to be handled without permission." They stepped inside, their gazes sweeping the foyer as though it were a crime scene. Maya held Eliza close, whispering softly in a rhythm only he could comprehend. Preston remained nearby, his posture tense and guarded. The agents carried out their inspection with quiet precision, checking the pantry, the nursery, and the backyard. One asked to speak with Eliza privately, but Maya refused on his behalf. "He does not communicate with strangers. He has autism." "I am his comfort," she said. "You can ask questions, and I will answer." Marcus noted while writing, "They found nothing." Naturally, there was nothing to uncover. Yet just before leaving, Marcus paused and looked back. This inspection was routine, but off the record, Mr. Caldwell mentioned, "It is uncommon to see a child so well cared for." Whoever filed the complaint likely had other intentions. Preston closed the door quietly, jaw clenched. Nearby, Maya was holding Eliza, who had drifted to sleep from the strain. Maya whispered, "Someone is trying to reach us." Preston nodded and replied, "I believe I know who," though he did not name anyone, as it was unnecessary. That afternoon, Preston arranged a meeting in his home office with a brief guest list. Present were Maya, his lawyer Sandra Griffin, and a security consultant named Lionel Hatch, a composed, silver-haired man with decades of experience in federal protection. "This is not random," Preston started. "We have been facing opposition to the upcoming technology acquisition, indirect but persistent. Now, I want a complete background check on everyone who has accessed my family's private calendar." Sandra glanced up from her notes, asking, "Do you suspect an inside leak?" Preston looked toward Maya and replied, "I believe this is personal and targeted." Lionel tapped on the table and said, "I will initiate the sweep. Phones, laptops, digital traces. If someone attempted to exploit child welfare, we will uncover their origin." When the meeting concluded, Maya stayed behind. Preston regarded her and said, "You do not have to remain involved." She responded firmly, "I must. This is no longer just your struggle. It belongs to Eli, too, and I am not going to leave." His eyes flickered briefly. "You always speak as if someone has lost something precious." Maya exhaled deeply. "I have, but Eli will not become one of those losses." He did not reply, but there was no need for words. That evening after dinner, Maya sat on the porch swing with Eli resting against her. The stars began to appear, one after another, illuminating the sky like ancient secrets finally coming to light. Preston came to join her, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Would you mind if I sat down?" She shifted over, and he took the spot beside her, close enough to be near but not overwhelming. "I once believed silence was a burden," he confessed, thinking quietness meant something had been shattered. "But now I am realizing there are various kinds of silence." She turned to face him. "There is silence born from sorrow," he continued, "silence rooted in guilt. And then there is a silence that feels secure, like this moment right here." Maya held her tea carefully. "Secure silence is a rare gift," he agreed, sipping gently. "You have provided that for Eli and for me as well." They shared that peaceful quiet for a long time, the night growing deeper around them. Then Preston broke the stillness. "Have you ever wondered what it would be like if Eli could express himself not only through his hands, but also with spoken words?" Maya glanced out into the dark yard. "Sometimes, but I tend to think about the messages he already shares in other ways. When he takes my hand or leans into me without a word, that is communication. It is simply a different form of language." Preston's voice softened. "You are teaching me how to understand that language." Then, like a soft murmur carried by the breeze, a new voice broke the silent stillness. Small and uncertain, Maya Williams froze while Preston Vale looked down. Eliza, half asleep, had moved slightly, and her lips formed the sound once more. Mama. It was no longer a figment of their hopes or a fleeting dream. Preston's eyes grew wide, and Maya's hands started to shake. Her breath caught as she whispered, "Eliza, what did you say?" The boy blinked slowly. His eyelids fluttered, then fell shut again. Preston faced Maya and asked, "Did you catch that?" She replied quietly, her voice trembling, "I did." It was the first spoken word aloud from Eliza in nearly 2 years. Preston remained silent for almost a minute before reaching for Maya's hand with certainty. "We will protect him," he declared firmly. "Whoever tried to harm us won't get another chance." Maya nodded, tears flowing freely as the soft glow of the porch light surrounded the three of them on the old swing. They had moved one step closer to healing, one word closer to a future none had dared to imagine. The next morning brought no relief or peace. The house lay quiet, yet beneath that stillness was a weight of tension, a feeling that something had irrevocably changed. Preston rose earlier than usual and headed to the gym, channeling his emotions into the punching bag. The force behind his strikes was driven not by physical exercise, but by something more profound and unresolved. Maya awoke to the dull, rhythmic thudding of his fists hitting the bag, echoing through the house. Softly somewhere down the corridor, she quietly slipped out of bed and checked on Eli first. He was nestled beneath the blanket, his breathing calm and steady, his small arm wrapped around the stuffed bear she had repaired for him the previous week. A miracle still resonated deep within her chest. The voice, the word he had whispered, "Mama." It was not loud, but unmistakably real. Downstairs, Maya prepared coffee, the aroma weaving through the kitchen like a small reminder of normalcy. When Preston returned, drenched in sweat and silent, she handed him a mug without saying a word. Their fingers brushed briefly. He paused for a moment longer than usual and said softly, "Thanks." "Didn't sleep much, I could tell," she answered kindly. He stared into his cup before asking, "Has he said anything today?" She shook her head. "But it wasn't a dream. I know what I heard." "So do you." "I do," he replied quietly, then sighed deeply. "But that also means whoever is after us knows how close he is getting, and they may try again." Maya's face hardened. "Let them try." Preston looked at her with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "You are braver than most people I know." "I'm not brave," she answered. "I'm protective. That is different." They sat facing each other, a stillness before the storm they both sensed was approaching. Minutes later, Lionel Hatch appeared, carrying a file under his arm and wearing an expression that left no space for small talk. "I have something," he announced as he entered Preston's study. "I ran cross-checks on all communications coming out of this. Over the last 60 days, there has been a development regarding the property." Preston leaned forward while Maya stood nearby with her arms crossed tightly. "Someone had gained access to your schedule through an indirect channel involving an old assistant who still had restricted clearance to the database." Preston furrowed his brow. "That must be Sylvia Warner." Lionel added, "She was dismissed 6 months ago, but they neglected to remove her cloud-level access. And guess who she is working for now?" Maya's jaw tightened. "Let me guess. Lark Technologies?" Lionel confirmed. "And it's not just employment. She is engaged to their chief operating officer." Preston slammed his fist against the desk. This was not mere corporate rivalry, it was personal. They knew exactly how to hit us where it hurts. Through Eliza, exactly. The welfare report was only the opening move, Lionel said. "There's more. They quietly filed an injunction accusing your purchase of one of their subsidiaries of coercion." "That is preposterous," Preston retorted. "They are resorting to foul play." Maya narrowed her eyes. "They are using Eliza to unsettle you. It's not just me." Preston responded, "It's all of us." Lionel leaned closer. "There is one option left, sir. You can file a counter motion and expose everything, but it carries risk. They will scrutinize every detail, including Maya's background." She looked up calmly. "I have nothing to hide." Preston rose. "And even if there were issues, it would be irrelevant. She is now part of this family. I will not allow them to tarnish her name." Maya's breath hitched. He had never expressed those words before. Not like that. Her eyes searched his face, trying to determine if he was sincere or merely attempting to shield her legally, but he held her gaze with a calm assurance. "I am going to make the call," he said. "We will take them to court openly." By late afternoon, reports started to emerge through news outlets. Caldwell Dynamics had initiated a counter-lawsuit against Lark Technologies, accusing them of defamation, emotional distress, and misuse of government agencies for their own benefit. Maya observed the news from the guest room, Eliza asleep beside her. Her phone constantly buzzed with messages from acquaintances she had not contacted in many years. Some messages showed support, others expressed confusion, and several were hostile. One message caught her attention. It came from a private number and read, "I know who you are. He will discover it too. You do not belong there." She stared at the screen, hands trembling. 20 minutes later, Preston found her. Her facial expression conveyed everything without words. He did not ask anything. Instead, he took her phone and scrolled through the message. When he saw it, his jaw tightened. "This must end," he said. She glanced up. "They are not pursuing you. They are targeting me because they cannot harm me without affecting you first." A quiet moment passed between them. Then Preston said, "Come with me." He guided her down the hallway to the family room, where a fire flickered and gentle jazz music played softly. Eli stirred on the sofa, blinking sleepily. Preston knelt beside him and began signing slowly. Maya watched, surprised. His gestures were awkward but heartfelt. "Save Daddy love, Maya Eli's." A small smile appeared on Preston Vale's face as he turned to Maya Williams. "I've been learning quietly because if I am going to be the father he needs, I cannot wait for someone else to teach me." She did not respond immediately. Her throat tightened too much, but when she finally found her voice, it was soft and steady. "You are already becoming that." That evening, Lionel's team established a surveillance network around the estate. Drones, motion detectors, and secured perimeter alarms were all in place. No one would approach the house unnoticed again. However, the storm was not only outside. It lived in headlines, whispers, and anonymous comments online. Maya Williams became a silent lightning rod, praised by some, condemned by others. Rumors circulated, accusing her of being a gold digger, claiming she had seduced Preston Vale for influence, or that she had manipulated a vulnerable child. Preston Vale tried to protect her. He issued statements and stood beside her at every press conference. Yet some shadows could not be dispelled with words alone. One night, after a particularly harsh article called her the maid who would be queen, Maya sat alone on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket. Preston Vale joined her quietly, handing her a cup of tea. "I used to think I could fix everything with money," he said. "But it turns out the things we care about most must be fought for, not bought." She sipped the tea, her eyes red. "Do you think it will ever stop?" He looked at her with a quiet strength. "No, but I believe we will become stronger together." Her voice trembled. Do you ever regret involving me in all this?" He did not respond with words. Instead, he gently reached out and placed her hand over his heartbeat. "No," he said calmly, "because you reminded me of mine." Suddenly, tears welled up in her eyes once again, but this time they were not from pain. They sprang from hope. On that still night in a house shadowed by scandal, the three of them, Preston Vale, Maya Williams, and Eliza slept beneath the same roof, sharing a feeling they had never fully expressed before, a fragile yet genuine sense of family. The courtroom felt chillier than she had anticipated, a stark difference from the fiery emotions burning inside Maya. She sat silently next to Preston at the defense table, her hands tightly clasped in her lap, her breathing steady but shallow. The space buzzed with the clicking of cameras and murmurs as journalists packed every seat in the gallery. This was more than just a legal hearing. It was a performance. Judge Adeline Monroe, a woman in her 60s with silver hair, pulled back in a neat bun, entered, and promptly called the session to order. Her authoritative presence was firm yet fair, and the sound of her gavel resonated decisively through the room. This court will now proceed with Caldwell Dynamics versus Lark Technologies, she announced in a strong voice. Maya's gaze flicked toward the other side, where Sylvia Warner sat confidently in the front row. Her engagement ring sparkling like a prize. Beside her stood Greg Sinclair, the chief operating officer of Lark. The cold demeanor of a man who believed everything was subject to negotiation filled the room. They barely glanced at Maya Williams, as if her presence in the case was merely decorative, but she was no longer someone to be ignored. Preston Vale leaned in close and whispered, "They want you to show weakness. Do not give them that moment." She nodded firmly, her fingers still shaking slightly, but her spirit remained unshaken. The first testimonies commenced, filling the courtroom with legal terminology. Each party presented arguments concerning unauthorized data access, leaked schedules, and the misuse of the welfare system as a weapon. Jeremy Hatch took the stand, providing a precise and methodical account. He traced the digital footprints, the unrevoked permissions, and the connections between Sylvia and Lark Technologies. Although the court listened attentively, the atmosphere did not intensify until Maya's name surfaced. "And what part did Miss Maya Williams have in any of these corporate choices?" the opposing lawyer inquired, with a tone dripping with disdain. Jeremy replied calmly, "None at all." She was a member of the household staff. Her only priority was the child's safety. "Then why," the lawyer pressed, "did she involve herself in matters far beyond her professional duties?" Before Jeremy could answer, Judge Monroe raised a hand. "Miss Williams, are you prepared to give your testimony today?" Maya froze momentarily. Preston met her gaze and said, "The decision is yours." Slowly, she stood with firm legs despite her rapid heartbeat. "Yes, Your Honor, I am ready." The courtroom settled as the proceeding moved forward. Everyone's attention focused on her as she moved towards the witness stand. Sylvia gave a knowing smirk, while Maya Williams held her gaze steadily, without showing any sign of hesitation. Under oath, Maya narrated the sequence of events. She detailed discovering Eliza and described the silent moments they shared, how the boy had not spoken in years. She explained how she learned to understand his signs, the evening of the false welfare call, and the terror visible in Eliza's eyes when strangers entered their home. "Did Mr. Caldwell ever direct you to go beyond your responsibilities?" the Lark attorney inquired, leaning closer. Maya replied calmly, "No, but I chose to protect that boy, and I would make the same choice again." The lawyer's question implied suspicion. Why would a housekeeper involve herself in such a sensitive matter? The insinuation lingered heavily in the room. Maya's voice remained steady as she answered, "Because that little boy was not just scared, he was forgotten. And I know how that feels." The courtroom fell silent. Even Sylvia's confident smirk vanished. Maya continued, "I grew up in a system that overlooked my hunger and my sister's inability to hear, and no one bothered to learn how to communicate with her. I vowed that if I ever saw that look of despair in another child's eyes, I would never turn my back." Judge Monroe studied her thoroughly before saying, "Thank you, Miss Williams. You may step down." Returning to her seat, Preston Vale gently squeezed her hand under the table and whispered, You were incredible." She did not smile. "Not yet," she replied. "The battle is not over." Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded with people. Reporters called out questions about her connection with Preston and the whispers regarding financial motives. Maya stayed composed, holding her head high as she refused to respond to any of them. Preston placed a protective hand on her back while they moved toward the car. Inside, an uneasy quiet took over until Maya finally broke the silence with a question. "Do you regret putting me on that stand?" she asked. He turned toward her and said, "Not for a moment. You spoke with complete honesty in that courtroom, but they will distort the truth. They always do." Maya replied, "Then let them twist it." Preston answered firmly, "You don't bend." That evening, back at the estate, Eliza was sitting with Maya in the sunroom. He was quiet, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes distant in thought. She signed slowly. "Are you all right?" He hesitated before signing back. "I overheard them saying cruel things." Maya knelt down beside him, comforting. "They don't understand you. They don't understand us." Eliza nodded, then in slow movements he added, "You are still here." Her heart softened, breaking in a tender way. "I will always be here," she signed. Across the room, Preston observed the interaction. Later that night, he invited Maya into his office. On the desk lay a thick stack of paperwork with official seals and embossments. "What is this?" she inquired. "My will," he responded simply. "I am naming you as guardian. If anything happens to me—" "Don't," she interrupted quickly. "Don't say that." He insisted, "I must. They are not only attacking my business, they are fighting for my very soul. And my soul resides in that boy." She swallowed hard, trying to absorb the weight of his words. "If they discover something about me, what if they investigate too thoroughly? Then let them, because you have already demonstrated something stronger than a background check. What is that? Your love for him." There was no hint of romance in his voice, no theatrical exaggeration, just the plain truth. Sometimes that is the most beautiful thing. A few days later, a decision arrived. The court determined there was not enough evidence to support Lark Technologies' claims and dismissed the case permanently. Yet, it was the judge's concluding words that brought silence to the room. "I find it deeply troubling," Judge Monroe declared, "that a private company would exploit child welfare systems for corporate interests. Miss Williams' conduct exemplifies the highest ethical standards, ones we should all strive to follow. This court acknowledges her not simply as a witness, but as a guardian." The courtroom buzzed with whispered reactions. Sylvia's expression turned pale. Greg Sinclair stood abruptly and exited before the gavel even struck. Outside, the media swarmed Maya once again. However, this time, the inquiries were gentler, some even considerate. "How does it feel to be proven right? Will you continue supporting the Caldwell family?" Preston stepped forward, shielding her from the crowd. Yet Maya stood firm. Looking directly into the cameras with calm determination, she said, "I did not fight this battle to win. I did so because a small boy deserves someone who would never abandon him." That evening at home, the silence felt different. It was not hollow, but filled with something precious. Eliza had fallen asleep next to her on the sofa, his hand resting gently. Curled up in her arms, Preston stood by the doorway, observing them both with an expression that no longer required explanation. Family was not always defined by blood ties. At times, it was chosen amid chaos. Sometimes it was affirmed in a courtroom, and other times it was simply represented by a hand held through the storm, refusing to let go. The following morning brought a type of quiet that felt unfamiliar. It was not the silence of uncertainty, but the calm that follows a long and punishing storm. Sunlight poured through the estate's tall windows, warming the marble floors that had earlier seemed too cold and sterile. Now the house felt alive, not through noise, but through peace. Maya stood at the kitchen counter, preparing pancakes from scratch. Eliza sat on a stool nearby, still clad in pajamas, looking at her with the gentle gaze of a child who finally felt secure. He spoke little, and rarely ever did, but he signed one word softly: happy. Maya's heart clenched. She turned to him and signed back, me too. Behind them, Preston entered quietly, carrying a cup of coffee, with his tie hanging loosely around his neck. His presence no longer bore the guarded stiffness of a corporate titan. Instead, there was a tenderness in his eyes that Maya had not noticed when they had first met. "Looks like you are trying to spoil him," he teased softly. She gave him a warm smile. "If he starts his day watching the morning news talk about his dad, he deserves pancakes," Preston replied. Maya glanced sideways at the muted television in the corner where a live interview was playing. One of the hosts was reading headlines from a teleprompter. "Caldwell family scandal concludes with an unexpected champion, the housemaid who took a stand against a corporation, the boy who spoke without words." "They are not going to let this go quickly," he muttered. "I know," Maya replied while flipping a pancake. "But we don't need them." Eliza giggled as the pancake landed flawlessly in the pan. It was such a simple noise, so tiny yet meaningful. It embodied happiness, and in their home, happiness had been a rare visitor. Later that day, a letter arrived by a private messenger. It was personally delivered and sealed in a cream envelope addressed to Maya. Her brows knitted together as she opened it cautiously. Preston observed her from the doorway of the library. "Is something wrong?" he asked. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the handwritten text, then blinked, amazed. "It's from Judge Monroe," she whispered. "She's proposing to nominate me for the state's Child Welfare Advisory Board." Preston took a step forward, surprised. "That is huge. She says she believes my personal and professional background could influence future policies." Maya remained silent for a moment, her fingers tightening around the paper. "This isn't just about Eliza, is it? It's more than him. There are other children like him out there." Preston nodded quietly. "And not enough people willing to stand up for them." For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Mia saw something beyond the mansion, beyond even Eliza. She discovered a path, a calling not to run away from who she was, but to embrace it more fully. That afternoon, the three of them headed to a humble community center located on the outskirts of the city. The building was aged but well kept, its worn blue doors inviting and warm. Maya had found out about this place thanks to one of the lawyers from the trial. It housed an after-school program for children with disabilities that was sadly underfunded and short on staff. Inside, children were arranged in circles. Some sketched quietly, while others worked on tablets specially designed for communication. A young boy, about 7 years old, struggled to shape letters mid-air with his hands. Maya knelt beside him and gently guided his fingers. "Like this," she said softly, signing the word home. He repeated the movement, his face lighting up with a bright smile as he succeeded. Preston stood quietly at the door with Eliza beside him, holding his hand. Neither said a word, yet their faces reflected the same feelings: wonder, respect, and a delicate warmth. When they left, the center's director followed Maya outside. "If you ever want to volunteer or teach, the doors are always open," she offered. She paused before glancing at Eliza, who was now signing to Preston. "I think I would like that." That evening, as the sun lowered and cast golden hues across the walls, Maya sat alone in the garden. The fragrance of blooming jasmine floated softly in the air, blending with distant, gentle sounds, creating a serene and hopeful atmosphere. She held the judge's letter in one hand and her phone in the other. At last, she dialed someone she had not spoken to in many years, her mother's sister, Aunt Lorraine. The line rang twice before a familiar voice came through. "Maya, sweetheart," the voice said, and her throat tightened. "Hi, I just wanted to hear your voice." "Oh, baby, I saw you on the news," Aunt Lorraine replied warmly. "I told your cousins. That girl right there, that's my niece. That's Maya Williams, and she has more bravery in her little finger than most people have in their entire body." Maya blinked back tears. She never imagined she would make it this far. "Well, you did, and your mama would be so proud." They spoke for almost an hour, laughter weaving through their conversation. Pain arose, but so did a sense of healing. By the time they said their goodbyes, Maya felt a part of herself had returned, one she did not even realize had been missing. Later that evening, Maya entered the nursery. Eliza was already tucked in, a gentle nightlight casting a soft glow nearby. She bent down, kissed his forehead, then started to leave. "Wait," he whispered. She paused, surprised. It was the first word he had spoken aloud in many months. He pointed to her and whispered again, "Stay." Maya blinked, swallowed the lump forming in her throat, and sat down beside him. He reached for her hand and closed his eyes. Downstairs, Preston stood at the base of the staircase, silently listening. When Maya joined him, his eyes searched her face. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I'm more than okay," she replied. "I feel whole." Preston hesitated for a moment before speaking. "There was something I wanted to ask." She tilted her head slightly. "I know this is not how things usually unfold, and I do not wish to hurry anything at all. But I want you to stay. Not just as staff, but as family." Maya's breath caught, and Preston looked at her intently. "I am not seeking answers tonight. I just want you to understand that regardless of what label the world assigns you, witness, advocate, you have already become something far more meaningful to me." She turned away, her heart racing. "This was never about love, no," he agreed. "It was about truth. Yet sometimes, when truth is finally secure, love quietly follows." In the weeks that followed, Maya embraced the judge's nomination. She became active in advocacy groups, traveled with Preston and Eliza to community gatherings, and began creating inclusive educational programs for schools. Her story spread softly and with respect, not as a fairy tale, but as a reminder that sometimes it is not the powerful who transform the world, but those who dare to care when no one else will. Almost a year later, on a spring morning, a framed photograph sat on Preston's office desk. It showed Maya and Eliza beneath a tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves, both of them laughing freely. Above the picture, small engraved letters read, "Family is the place where the storm breaks." Beneath it lay a simple quote from Maya herself. "Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply showing up and remaining,